Did you guys hear about Luke and Jay Ware?
They're lizard people.
They're not lizard people. Oh, welcome to the Back of the Gap podcast. Today we're talking about gossip. I'm Joey, joined by Josh and Travis. Gossip is definitely something that I think that the church struggles with a lot. It's something that I think everyone understands is bad and negative, right? But gossip is such an easy thing to fall into, because it seems so harmless, right? Especially the way that the church kind of does it, if you will. One common thing that we talk about at our church, but I know a lot of churches that just act like this is not a thing, is, oh, well, let's really be praying for so-and-so. You know, they're struggling with this. And it's like, you can just say, hey, can y'all pray for my friend so-and-so? Like, just pray for, that's it. There's no context needed. But instead they're like, man, y'all just really got to pray for, you know, our friend, trying to think of a fake name.
Where?
Yeah, let's just, we really got to pray for our friend Ware. You know, he's been struggling with alcohol and drugs, and, you know, he's just really in this huge world of crime, and just, like, lays out all this stuff in the scope of, oh, let's pray for this person. And it's like, not everyone needs to hear that.
Yeah.
And that is gossip, even though you're saying, oh, well, let's pray for him about it.
Yeah.
You're just using that as an excuse to talk bad about somebody.
Yeah. And sometimes it's just grandma telling about some grandchild. Like, I've been to churches before where grandma is just, like, laying it all out there about what their grandchild's been doing. I'm like, okay, even if your intention isn't to just, like, tell everybody for the purposes of gossip, you're still gossiping just by telling the entire congregation about this.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think there's a lot of people that maybe don't recognize that it's gossip, right? And they're not trying to be malicious. But I think we really do need to take a step back and be like, well, this is not benefiting the other person. Mm-hmm. So why am I just spewing all their business out, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I think it comes down to intentionality. Like it does with all sin, I think it comes down to, like, intentionality and the heart behind it being the root of the issues. Like, if your true concern for the person is, oh, I want to make sure that this person is taken care of, I want to make sure that they're whatever issues they may be going through is dealt with in a proper way, you're not going to have a desire to just spread that with everybody, because your first concern is to care about the person and to love the person. But if your main concern is to, you know, tell a story or share something you get interested, because you get this itching feeling, right? If you get something that you know is, ooh, it's tantalizing, and it's like it's good information that you want to share with people. It's hard to want to keep that to yourself if it's something like it's juicy. But it really does come down to, like, how serious you take the situation, how much you care for the other person, and whether or not you're the one who wants to benefit from it, or if you want the other person to benefit from it. So I think if it's something that you find yourself doing, take a step back, look at why you're doing it, the real reason why you're doing it, not just because you say, oh, pray for this person, but the real reason in your heart, why are you sharing this news with somebody, and try to figure out what the best course of action would be from there. I think would be a good bit of advice.
Yeah.
Coming from someone who has done this in the past, and I'm sure we all have.
Oh, absolutely. Like I said, at the beginning, it is such an easy thing to fall into, right? Oh, such and such hasn't shown up to church, in the last few weeks. What's going on? And if I'm the person who knows that, I want to tell people, right?
Yeah.
Because I want people to enjoy the information I have for them. Or if someone else knows, I want to know. I want to hear that information, right?
It's almost like fun or fulfilling.
It absolutely is. But it's something that we have to really fight against. Yeah. Because, A, it's none of our business, right? But B, like you're saying about intentionality, a lot of the times I don't think that we're trying to build people up when we're doing that.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. I'm not saying that there aren't rare cases where, your goal is to build someone up. But even if that is your goal, that's not what Scripture says to do.
Yeah.
Right? So Matthew 18:15 says, "If your brother sins against you, go and tell him his fault between you and him alone. If he listens to you, you've gained your brother. But if he does not listen, take one or two others along with you, that every charge may be established by the evidence of 2 or 3 witnesses. If he refuses to listen to them, tell it to the church. And if he refuses to listen even to the church, let him be to you as a Gentile and a tax collector." And, just kind of for a little bit of context, Jesus is speaking to the Jewish people. That's why, he's saying treat them as a Gentile, right?
Yep.
The Jews and Gentiles did not get along. They did not talk to one another. And so what it's saying is, someone sins against you, go to that person alone, right? And so in the realm of gossip, it's like, well, this is different, right? They didn't sin against me. They did something else, and this is not applicable. Yes, it is applicable, okay? If what you have is a problem with somebody, go to them alone, right? Maybe you hear gossip from someone else.
Yeah.
And instead of spreading that, go say, hey, man, I heard this. Like, is this the case? Is this true? This doesn't sound like you. Or, hey, I heard this, and I think it is the truth, and I think that we need to have a conversation, right? Yeah. Where you're going to that person alone and in love. And if they don't listen, that's when you get others involved.
Mm-hmm.
And not go tell everybody. It says go with 1 or 2,
Yep.
right? And in this case, this is dealing with a sin issue. So then, bring the church. And then, if they don't want to listen to you, okay, well, then you just don't have to associate with that person.
Yeah.
And so how that relates to gossip, I think, is a very similar thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
It is not our job to just go and tell the world about everything we've heard about this one person, or everything we're going to make up about this one person. Go find out the truth for yourself, alone in private, and be done with it, right?
And kind of going off what you were talking about with, like, someone, you had taking issue with someone or someone doing something to you and then going and spreading about it. Is that what you're talking about? Kind of.
Yeah.
Okay. So, like, I've also, kind of noticed sometimes someone will mention, like, oh, I just really need you to pray for me right now. This person did this and this, and I just got to deal with it all now. And it's like, no, it's okay to ask for prayer. Like, hey, there's something going on, but don't just like start spieling all about like what somebody did to you, or what they may not be doing for you or something like that. You need to go to them about that and kind of handle that between you and them. Or like you said, through the proper channels like the Bible lays out. And like Josh said, sometimes you need to look at your intentions. I feel like a lot of times, and I've done this once before, but we need to look at our intentions, because usually when we're doing that, it's more of like a, hey, I need you to feel sorry for me right now.
Yep.
Let me just tell you all that's been happening to me. And really, we don't need to be looking for like sympathy and pity. What we really need to be doing is, searching for peace in every situation.
And on the flip side of that, it's not wrong to go and ask for like advice on a situation, right? Like, I can remember, I'm not gonna say that, but I don't think it's wrong. Like, if you have something that you're going through, maybe like this is laying out, like if your brother sins against you and you're not quite sure how to deal with that, I don't think it's wrong to go to like a pastor or something and ask for advice on how to approach that situation, because like if you explain that in confidence to somebody, it's going to remain between you and that person if whoever you're sharing it to is trustworthy, like, say like a pastor or somebody that you know. I don't think that it's wrong to ask for advice, godly counsel on how to handle that, knowing that you're trying to get an outcome that honors God and not an outcome that honors yourself. So yeah.
Yeah. I think a lot of times you do have to look at it kind of on a case-by-case basis.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, for sure.
I don't think there's an easy answer on that, but I think that there are a lot of cases where I think you are probably smart to seek counsel on how to handle a situation.
Sure.
Yeah.
Right? And in that case, it does come down to intentions of well, who am I going to go seek counsel from?
Yep.
Right? Because if someone, close to you decides to wrong you, well, I don't think the goal is, hey, I'm going to go seek advice from all of that person's friends, so they're all on my side now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right? Like, that's probably not the right approach, right? So deciding who to seek counsel from, and when you do, make it clear that this is in confidence. This conversation never discussed, and I'm really seeking answers. I don't want you to just listen to me vent. Like, I genuinely want your advice.
Yeah.
Because if you're just going to someone to vent, like, and you're not actually going to take anything they're giving back to you, well, there's no point in you going and seeking, that conversation.
Yeah.
I think that venting is important and helpful, but if it's to the detriment of someone else, then that should not be what we as Christians should do.
Yep.
Yeah. At that point, it's just gossip.
Yeah. But I think there are people that, you're close enough to that maybe you don't need to seek counsel, and you know that you're close enough that you're going to be able to, work it out.
Yeah.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, not that you would, Travis, but Travis, if you just severely wronged me, I might not know how to express myself in a proper way, and I might not know exactly how to handle the situation, but I feel like that we're close enough that I could just go to you directly, and I might say some stuff that I regret, and we end up having to apologize, the both of us, right?
Yeah.
But I think that we will be able to resolve that without me having to drag somebody else into the situation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But going with that, I think there's also some times where it's like, well, this person, I don't even know him that well, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I've heard this gossip about him. Maybe you just don't even need to address it,
Yeah.
right?
Yep.
It's like, well, someone's gossiping to you about someone else. It's like, well, I don't know that person that well, but from what I do understand, that's probably not the case, and I don't think you should be talking about them like that behind their back.
Mm-hmm.
And just leave it at that,
I think it's really important to kind of stop gossip in its tracks also. Like maybe you aren't the initiator. Maybe you aren't the destination of where that gossip is headed. Maybe you're just the middleman. But, like, we don't have to be the middleman. And we have to stop and look at our intentionality and looking at, like, okay, why am I listening? Why am I not saying anything? And listening is a huge thing. I know for myself, like, I usually don't have too much of an issue, like, trying to just go around and tell people a lot of things. Sometimes I do. But if I do, it's going to be, like, someone who's, like, extremely close to me, and I know isn't going to talk about it. But, which is still an issue, regardless. But a lot of what my issue with gossip is usually trying to just, like, listen to everything. It's just, like, know everything. A lot of times I may, like, start asking questions, and then I won't realize until afterwards, hey, like, maybe you don't really need to know about that. And this is something that Josh has made me realize a lot at work.
Huh.
Like, when we're just working at something, and I'm like, hey, Josh, what do you think about this? Or, like, hey, Josh, I heard you mention something about it. Or Josh may say something, and I'm like, okay, did you notice that? All right, what do you think is going on about that? And a lot of times it's not really important information. A lot of it is not necessarily any of my business. And none of it is usually, like, malicious information, normally it's just, like, maybe a slightly personal thing that somebody just doesn't want everybody know about, like, especially when it comes to relationships. I'm a big person who's like, dude, if I sense a potential relationship, I'm gonna try and get as much information about it as I can, which which Josh has made me realize lately. So
I remember one time we were working together. It was like a Saturday. You launched like a CSI investigation into what girls I might be interested in or not.
Yeah. Well, that one was was a CSI investigation because I had my
Yeah,
suspicions
just
already.
suspicions.
I knew. You didn't have to tell me, but I already knew in my heart of hearts, to a certain degree, and that was just more of a getting you to mention, like actually
Just admit it to
vocalize it.
myself.
But I think even with that, like that's a very slippery slope
Yeah, it
for
is.
more gossip, and I think
Yeah.
that's kind of where you were going with that. Like, we have to be able to catch ourselves even doing those small things that we're like, oh well, this isn't even that bad, right?
Yeah,
Because it builds a pattern of how we think about people and how we think about different things that we might see, and well, now we're always analyzing, trying to figure things out, maybe jump into conclusions.
Yeah.
And then we think something's exciting, some piece of information that we've really made up in our heads. And we're like, well, I got to share this to everybody I know.
and also just like the expectations that come with it.
Oh,
Like,
yeah.
Whenever you start to, like build this whole story in your mind, like you start to get expectations, and it's like maybe your expectations, maybe this person figures out about your expectations on this situation that they're involved in, and like when that doesn't work out, like they're even more disappointed, or that like brings them down even more. And so just like, I guess making sure that the only information I'm trying to get is information that is being given to me freely, not necessarily like through the drain pipe, And so it's like, just making sure that I'm not really concerned with obtaining information, because that's a big thing for me. It's just like I just like having the archives in my mind. It's like of things just to know, just because I like to know a lot of stuff.
Knowledge is power, man.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. For me, it's more of a deal of like I'm the one that likes to be talking about other people. It's more or less a situation of somebody does something that like makes me upset or mad, or that I don't like, and then I feel like I have to tell everybody about it. It's like so and so did, whatever. Joey just like slapped a little girl across the face, and like, man, what a loser.
Man,
and I got to tell everybody about that because it makes me mad, and I need to feel validated.
Well, look, if I do that, you probably do need to report me to the proper authorities.
Yeah.
But not everybody needs to know about that.
Yeah.
Oh,
Are you the little girl in this situation?
I was.
Yeah.
It hurt a lot. I just want you to know that.
Well, he started out really personal, and he's
Wow.
like, "Yeah, Joey slaps a little girl."
Well, Josh, you are a little girl.
Oh, thanks.
No,
No, Josh, you're a
Don't
big
tell
boy.
nobody.
No, Josh, you're a big
no,
boy.
I think that, I definitely understand both of those perspectives really well.
Mm-hmm.
And, like, if someone makes me feel wronged or slighted or whatever, like, I want to feel justified, and I want to tell somebody just so they can agree with me, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
A lot of the times, I'm not even concerned with how I'm going to handle it going forward, right? I haven't even made it that far in my mind.
Yeah.
It's just like, this sucks, and I need someone to validate those feelings.
Yeah.
But on the flip side, man, I love just knowing things.
Mm-hmm.
I love being on top of the news, even if that's fake news, right? Like, catch me out here stalking people on Facebook. I'm gonna know everything about everybody. But both of those things are incredibly dangerous, and it's not what God has called us to.
Yeah. Another thing about like wanting to like get and retain all this information, I think for me it comes from like wanting to know a lot about everybody, which is not like wanting to know about somebody, wanting to get to know them, and is not necessarily a bad thing. And I think we kind of talked about that a lot within our podcasts, is that, your intentions may not be malicious, but they can still be problematic, And so making sure that while it's okay to want to know about somebody, or want to pray about pray for something for somebody, we don't necessarily need to seek out information that isn't being given to us freely.
Yeah.
And I'm glad that you brought that up, once again, Travis, you just say things in a certain way that makes things click in my mind differently. That's what I love about doing this podcast and just being able to be your friend, Travis. But
What was it?
you said that a lot of times people just want to know things about somebody and not know somebody, right?
Mm.
And I think that that's something we talk about, which is problematic with our relationship with God, right?
Mm-hmm.
If we're just focused on knowing everything we can about God, but we don't actually know God, well, what was it all for, right?
Yeah.
And I think the same thing, like, if all we're worried about is just learning all these facts about, oh, who's dating who and who has a problem with who and all these just surface level nonsense, we don't actually get to know the people in our lives.
Mm-hmm.
Well, what was it all for?
That's why reality TV is popular.
That is true.
And so I think that's a really good way to think about it, right? None of these gossip is not helping us, grow closer to the people in our lives, right?
Mhm.
We just know more about what's happening in the day to day.
Yeah.
But it's not helping us know them more.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's an interesting point. I'm glad you brought that up. Or you didn't. I'm glad you said something that made me think that way.
Yeah. I didn't say that word for word.
No.
In Matthew chapter 12, verses 33 through 37, it says, either make a tree good and its fruit good, or make a tree bad and its fruit bad, for the tree is known by its fruit. You brood of vipers, how can you speak good when you are evil? For out of the abundance of your heart the mouth speaks. The good person out of his good treasure brings forth good. The evil person out of his evil treasure brings forth evil. I tell you, on the day of judgment, people will give an account for every careless word they speak. For by your words you will be justified, and by your words you will be condemned. He's talking to the Pharisees here, I believe, isn't he?
I want to say that's correct. And so, I mean, really what we see here is a very intense passage, right?
Mm-hmm.
And there's a lot in there, but, kind of focusing on verse 36, on the day of judgment, people will give account for every careless word they speak.
Yeah.
And so when we talk about gossip, like, these words are careless.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So some translations use the word idle, right?
Yep.
Every idle word you speak. And, like, what does it mean to be idle? To be doing nothing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Lazy speech.
Yeah. And it can sound incredibly intense, but I think that our words are extremely important. Because it takes a lot of words to build someone up, and it
Mhm.
takes a very small amount of words to break someone down.
Yeah.
And so one aspect of gossip that I think is kind of universally known that we haven't really covered yet is, like, that gossip's going to get back to the person who's being talked
Mhm.
about.
Yep.
That's true.
And when they hear that, you as a Christian have said this about them, maybe you didn't even start, you just spread this about them, right? What else does it say? They're going to be known.
Yeah, the scariest part about this passage is verse 37 for me. It says, for by your words you will be justified, and by your words you will be condemned, which I kind of take to mean, like, the standard that you judge people to is going to be the standard that you're going to have to be judged by yourself one day, which, like, going back to what I was saying earlier about, like, how, I like to rant about people that I get upset about, like, I'm going to be judged by that standard one day, and you best believe I ain't lived up to those standards sometimes.
That's right.
So, yeah.
God gonna be sitting there ranting about the things you've done. I think that's a really good point that y'all made about, like, careless speech and, like, lazy words and stuff like that. Just, like, lazy speech. And I think that's a really, really good comparison that the Bible has made, because it takes, like, a certain kind of effort not to sit there and just, like, spill all the beans that you have in your head that you've gathered throughout the day. It takes a certain amount of effort to just sit there and just, like, when something comes to your mind, be like, all right, nope, not gonna say it, because sometimes it's easy to say that it takes, like, it's like no action, like the absence of action is just no action. But like sometimes like you have to take action in order to not do something. And so, yeah, I think that's something that I definitely could focus on a lot more personally, is making sure that I'm taking action and like actually thinking about what's coming out of my mouth, and making sure that I'm being more intentional about that, rather than just like opening my mouth and just like words just flowing.
Yeah. I'm glad you brought it up. It's not easy to do this, right? I've seen some posts on maybe Instagram where it's like, it doesn't take any effort to say something nice, or like you're wasting all this effort to be mean and bully or whatever. It's like, man, the easy route a lot of times is to join in, right? Is to be rude, is to make some small comment. That is really easy, and that's what we want to do. That's our gut reaction.
If you ever work in like a setting where you have to deal with customers, it's not easy to be nice all the time.
Dang straight, man. But it shows where your heart is at.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And if you are able to control your tongue, if you are going to speak, be nice, right? If you are able to hold yourself up, I think that people really do notice that.
Yep.
It's not something that, people are just going to ignore.
Yeah. Analogy time.
Analogy time.
It's harder to swim against the river than to just flow along with it.
I like that. Because, the rest of the world, it is like a river, right? It's the way everyone else talks about everybody else.
Yeah.
And for anyone who's saying, well, I can just not get involved, I'm just going to sit there, right? You're being dragged by the river.
Yeah.
You have to be actively fighting against it. You can't just sit where you're at.
Yeah. Because even if you just sit and listen, you're still taking in the things that other people are saying.
Yeah. And when you don't call them out on that, and you just sit and listen, it's almost seen as an endorsement. Right? It's like, well, if he had a problem, he'd say something, right?
Yeah.
But if he's here, he's just listening.
Yep. Guilty by association.
Yeah.
Well,
it's our call to action.
What's our call to action? If you don't got nothing nice to say, don't say nothing at all.
Monkey hear no evil, monkey see no evil, monkey do no evil.
Is that a saying?
No, monkey say no evil.
Yeah.
Seriously though, just making sure that, like we said, be intentional about when you're listening to something, and you should be, interjecting. When you're saying something, and you should be keeping it to yourself, or bringing it to that person. When you're thinking about something and you're dwelling on it, it could be, that's a whole nother thing that we didn't even get to. Just like sitting there, you could like with the voices in your head, just internalizing
like
gossip,
brewing on something,
letting it develop, not through people but through your own brain. Anyway, that's a whole nother thing. Maybe it's technically not gossip, but just being intentional about when you should be taking action and when you should be intentional. But rather you're just allowing yourself to flow down that river.
Yeah. Quick point on what you brought up. That probably is even a whole other episode, but like, you're right. Don't let those thoughts linger, because from the overflow, the abundance of the heart, the mouth is going to speak. So if that's all you're focusing on, you're putting all your energy and attention on this situation, well, you're going to end up spilling about it, right?
Yeah.
Well, this has been the Back in the Gap podcast. Thank you so much for listening. We'll see you next week.
Goodbye.